Well, hey there, guys. Greetings and salutations, and welcome to this newest installment of Open Mic, the show where the mic is open. The floor, as they would say, is yours. What do you guys want to talk about? That is what we're here to discuss. I'm, of course, your host, John Campea. Good to have you guys here, and it's a wonderful, wonderful day. Congratulations to my friends in England of England advancing to the Euros semifinals. And that's nice. That's good. And I'm happy for you. I'm happy for you, England. I really, really am. But what is more important, what is the bigger issue, is, of course, Canada has stunned the world and advanced to the semifinals of Copa as they defeated, surprisingly, Venezuela. And couldn't believe it when I saw that. Anyway, so here's how today's show is going to go, guys. We're going to start off by talking about a couple things, but then the main part of our show is really just taking your comments and questions. If you have a thought, theory, opinion, question, observation, whatever that you'd like me to address, go ahead and use the super chat feature there in the chat and send it in. But keep in mind, I reserve the right not to read any of the ones that come in if I deem them to be inappropriate to be addressed on the show. All right, guys. With that down, thanks again for joining me on this Sunday afternoon. I want to talk about a couple things that came out in the world of entertainment this week. And the first thing I want to talk about is the new Beverly Hills Cop film, Beverly Hills Cop, Axel F. Now, for those of you who didn't hear me talk about this on the show before, I have not been excited for this movie. And the reason I was not looking forward to or was excited about this movie was because, and it's totally unfair, I admit, was that Coming to America 2, right? Like, I loved Coming to America. I'll be honest with you. I'm one of the few people that I actually prefer Coming to America over Beverly Hills Cop. Don't get me wrong. I like them both. I like Beverly Hills Cop, the original. I really like Coming to America. But if I had like a Saturday afternoon and I had to pick one of those two movies to watch, I'd probably watch the first Coming to America. Regardless, I really love both of the originals. So when they announced that they were doing a Coming to America 2, I got really excited. And I saw the trailers for it, and I thought it was the trailers were hilarious for Coming to America 2 and all that kind of stuff. Loved what I saw. And then the movie came out on streaming. And it was horrible. Terrible. Now, if you liked Coming to America 2, God bless. That's awesome. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I really am. I'm not trying to talk you out of enjoying it. I'm just saying, for me, it was a profound disappointment. Really not funny at all. The few funny things, and there were a few funny things in it, but they were all in the trailer, and I really didn't like it. Anyway, that made me very apprehensive about another revisited Eddie Murphy classic being brought straight to streaming, right? So I'm like, yeah. And I saw the teasers for it. I didn't think the teasers looked very good, to be honest with you. And then me and Ann and our family sat down on the 4th of July after we had dinner and after we watched the fireworks. And we decided to pop in Axel F because Ann's sister, my sister-in-law Olive, who was here, is an extra in the movie. So we thought, we're going to sit down and watch where Olive pops up in the movie. Anyway, so we watched Axel F, and I got to tell you, I really enjoyed it. Like, way better than Coming to America 2. And it is, and I know this isn't a big leap to say, I believe it is the best Beverly Hills Cop movie other than the original. Like, I think the original is still the original. That doesn't change. But like, it's clearly better than Beverly Hills Cop 2 and obviously much, much better than Beverly Hills Cop 3. It had, and here's the thing, they managed to do a very difficult balancing act of, on the one hand, making it feel feel just like that original Beverly Hills Cop, right? Axel Foley has the same personality and it had that same kind of pacing, the same kind of cadence. It felt just like the original, but it was modernized and updated and clearly took place in today's world. And they found a way to make both of those things work. One of my favorite things about the movie was the fact, and they do this right away, you recognize immediately they used all the songs from the original soundtrack. Take down, break down, honey. Da, 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 da. Take down, break down, you busted. I'm listening to this song. I'm like, oh my God, this is, and then, playing the Neutron Dance and all, and they're playing all the original music from the original film. And I'm like, this is a great, and it worked too. It didn't feel forced. Like there's this car chase going on and they're playing some of the music from the original movie. And it's like, this feels like it fits. They did a great job with it. They did a great job with that. And of course, then they updated and modernized the original bum, 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 the original like Axel F theme. And that worked great too. So the music in it was incredible. And the humor was on target. Now it had some of the same shortcomings as like some of the original Beverly Hills Cop movies. Like some of the jokes you could see coming from a mile away, and some of them felt very, frankly, dad joke-ish. So not all the humor landed. Some of the plot points were very convenient. I mean, the moment you meet Kevin Bacon's character in the captain's office, is there anybody out there that didn't immediately know, oh, that's the bad guy? Like he didn't even say a single word yet. And you could just, oh yeah, that's the bad guy. And then how easily and very conveniently Axel was able to come across certain pieces of information, whatever. That's just like the original films. So, but I mean, honestly, like, is Axel F going to end up in my top 5 favorite films of the year list? No. But was I wonderfully and pleasantly surprised by the film? Absolutely. Absolutely. And honestly, I'm surprised I'm saying this because I would not have guessed I'd be saying this a week ago. I highly encourage you, if you've got a couple hours, sit down, pop on the new Beverly Hills Cop. I think you're going to have a good time. It's not for everybody, but I honestly think you're going to have a good time. And it really should have been in theaters. It felt like a theatrical film. It wouldn't have made $400 million at the box office, but I bet you, with the budget that it had, I bet you it could have been profitable, and I think it would have been a fun time in the movies. But anyway, there's that. And by the way, how ageless is Eddie Murphy? I mean, he obviously, Anne went back. Anne's never seen the original Beverly Hills Cop, so she went back yesterday to watch. Now that she's seen the new one, she's like, I want to watch the original now. So she went back and watched it. And like, how everybody's saying, wow, Eddie Murphy hasn't aged a day. Go back and watch the original Beverly Hills Cop. Eddie Murphy has aged. 100% he has. He definitely looks way younger in the original ones. Yes. But it is amazing how incredibly Eddie Murphy is aging, because when he's on screen with Judge Reinhold, and by the way, Judge Reinhold looks really good for his age too. Like, just want to throw that out there. But when he's on screen with Judge Reinhold and the guy, I forget the actor's name, the guy who plays the captain in this movie, you're like, yeah, I mean, they look at them. They look like Eddie Murphy looks really good. Judge Reinhold looks pretty good too for his age, but I mean, Eddie Murphy, like, it's crazy. It's just crazy how little he has aged comparatively to a lot of other people around. Anyway, so Beverly Hills Cop, Axel F, color me surprised. I had a good time with it, and I think you guys should go check it out. All right. That's one of the great things I watched this week. Another thing that was great that I watched this week that I was a little bit late on, because it's been a busy week for me, so I was a little bit late getting caught up on the new episode of The Boys. This season of The Boys has been like any other season of The Boys. It's been outrageous. It's been raunchy, but it's been profound and deep, and not the deep, but it's been deep. And this news, I had a bunch of people writing to me because, like I said, I was a couple of days late getting caught up on the new episode. So I had a few people writing into me saying, "Oh my God, did you see this episode?" I'm like, "No, what did they do? What did they do?" So I'm watching the episode and oh my God, sit on that cake. Now fart in it. I'm like, oh my God. They have no problem showing complete depravity. And help me out in the live chat, guys. What's the name of the character again? The girl who's the CEO of Vought now? Is it Ashley? Help me out. I'm trying to remember in the live chat. Is her name Ashley? I can't remember. I think the character's name is Ashley. So yeah, Raymond Verada is saying, Raymond and Amir are all saying it is indeed Ashley. Okay, so Ashley is so filthy. Ashley is so filthy. I mean, they've hinted at that and shown that through the series, but oh my God, the depravity of the characters, and Ashley and Tech Knight with the whole Batman angle thing that they did with Tech Knight as well. It's just like, so it was a little bit of like Batman with a little bit of Pulp Fiction. If you've seen Pulp Fiction, you know what I'm talking about. And I'm just, wow. And a couple of shocking things too, like when Mother's Milk like shoots Sage. I'm like, what? And then she got up and I'm like, oh, that's right, because her brain will regenerate, all that kind of stuff. Anyway. But here's the thing that I loved most about the episode. And it's an element of The Boys that I've always really loved and appreciated. Like, other than Translucent, who was in season 1, if you guys remember Translucent was just a dick. Like that's just it, just plain a dick. There was never a moment that you kind of felt for him. There was never a moment that you had empathy, because Translucent was just Translucent. He was just a dick. But throughout the series, they've always done a good job of showing the other side of the bad guys. Like even Deep, as much of a douchebag as Deep is, like, you realize he comes from a place of pain too, right? Not this season, but in previous seasons, you've seen that he comes from a place of pain and insecurities and trauma that he's endured, right? And they've always done a good job about that. What I loved about this episode too is that they continue that with like Sister Sage telling her story about what turned her really to being so jaded and angry, and the story about her grandmother. And it's like, so screw them all. Like they give a reason why even each one of the bad guys is where they are. And it normally, not always, but normally comes from a place of pain and trauma, kind of like Magneto in a way. And there's a scene that I haven't heard anybody talk about, because everybody wants to talk about the milk squirt, and we'll talk about the milk squirt. That was awesome. The milk squirt or Zendaya or whatever. But there's a scene that I think was my favorite moment in the episode that I haven't heard anybody else talk about. And that scene to me was when Firecracker, who's a total asshole, right? I'm not taking away from that. But when Firecracker like walks up and tries to talk to Homelander and Sage and the vice president lady whose name is eluding me, and they shoo her off. There's a moment then that she just goes in the bathroom and cries. And I'll tell you why I love that scene so much. Because it again shows this asshole character that is also herself coming from a place of pain and shortcoming and insecurity and is filled with their own weaknesses and everything too. And she ultimately as well is kind of just looking for what everybody looks for in the sense of affirmation, in being included, having acceptance, like all that kind of stuff, like the heroes do, villains do, everybody does. And I love that moment, that just quick scene of her going into the bathroom and like just crying. And it just to me represents, like the scene with Sage explaining the background with her grandmother and everything too. To me, it represents one of the pieces of big brilliance of the entire boys show, which is all these characters are fascinating. Like they're all absolutely fascinating and they're all flawed, and in their own ways, they're all relatable. Even Homelander himself comes from a constant place of being manipulated. Like his whole life was about, because of how dangerous he could potentially be, his whole life was about him being manipulated and hurt and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I want to see if I can find this image. I'm not sure I can, but no, I can't find it. Too bad. I know I had it, but I lost it. The milking scene. But even Homelander himself is filled with insecurities, right? Like when Newman had to take over the speech, like she saved it for Homelander, right? She totally saved it for Homelander, but you could tell Homelander was humiliated and he was angry, and he's angry at himself, and he's like, he's in his own insecurity and all that kind of stuff. But even then, amongst people who are loyal to him, he's constantly manipulated. Because Firecracker does the whole thing about, I juiced up my boobies and squirt, squirt. And like, oh God, Anthony Starr. You know what? I brushed it off before when people started saying Anthony Starr deserves an Emmy for this season, because you know how us genre fans are. When somebody does something that's pretty good in a genre show, we're all like, they should win an Emmy. But Anthony Starr really, I believe wholeheartedly, is going to be a contender for an Emmy nomination for Best Actor. I really do believe that. I love this comment from Alton. Justice for German cake. But I mean, even in that scene, which is showing the frailty, weakness, depravity, whatever, of Homelander with his obsession with lactating milk, at the same time, it's showing that even then he's being manipulated. Like Firecracker, I think truly is loyal to Homelander. I don't think Firecracker is thinking to herself, I'm going to manipulate Homelander. But even just doing that is an act of manipulation, right? Like this whole show, the whole series is in one way or another, Homelander being incredibly evil, but also Homelander being manipulated. And so they just continue to do this kind of stuff that I always say it's like a Kevin Smith rapper with a Shakespearean insides. Like a Kevin Smith, like vulgar, filthy, kind of depraved kind of humor and like yucks. And that's true. That's there in The Boys. But when you go past that, it's basically got Shakespearean interiors. And I love it. And I just can't believe how good the show continues to be. And by the way, too, we see the continuing evolution of A-Train. You know, like just the fact, like when she says to him, like he's got kids, talking about Mother's Milk, he's got kids, think of his kid or his daughter. And like, so we're seeing even A-Train evolve more. The whole thing about Tech Knight's Alfred killing him at the end. I mean, oh my God. You know what? King Daddy Goat just made a really good statement. The Boys is like if Seth Rogen and Steven Spielberg had a baby. That's kind of The Boys. That's kind of The Boys. And I'm completely loving it. And by the way, I think Maeve is going to come back. I haven't heard that from anybody. I haven't read that anywhere. I'm just saying I have a feeling Maeve is going to come back. And I still think Soldier Boy is going to make a return too, because remember, Soldier Boy's not dead. Now the show is not going to sit. The episode last night is going to not going to sit right for everybody, because again, they're really leaning into their political satire, they're political observations and stuff like that. And it's less subtle than it used to be. And people who hold to those particular political ideologies are probably not going to find it funny. I get that, and I'm not here to debate or discuss the rightness or wrongness of that. I'm saying I recognize that's not going to be for everybody, because there are people who hold certain political ideologies, and the boys is kind of poking fun at it, so it's not going to be there for them. Get that. But I'm just saying, as somebody who doesn't really care about any of that stuff, I thought it was incredibly funny, and incredibly great. Now, they finally just confirmed what became obvious in the last week's episode, that Jeffrey Dean Morgan is in Butcher's head. He's not real. He's in Butcher's head, just like Becca is. So they came out and they made that. Then I thought it was pretty cool when they went back and showed the previous scenes with Jeffrey Dean Morgan, only this time he wasn't there in those scenes. So that was pretty good. So it was good to do that on there too. So overall, I thought it was great. I thought the episode was absolutely fabulous, but it's also getting dark, right? Now we're getting serious. Now Homelander is starting to talk about trying to overthrow, they do basically a little political coup, setting up prisons for dissidents, all that. I mean, it's starting to get like pretty heavy and serious as well. So, how they continue to fire on all cylinders like this, I don't know, but I'm so glad they do. I'm so glad they do. It's so good. And I'm loving the show. And it was yet another great thing that I saw this week. So 2 things that I really, really enjoyed this week. Axel F. and The Boys' new episode. So, yeah, all good stuff. And tonight, Bum, 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 bum. House of the Dragon, new episode tonight. So excited. So excited. Ann and I will often go camping on Sundays. So like later today, we're going to go out to a campsite, but it's actually not too far from where we live. And so what we do is we normally go like camping Sunday to like Wednesday or Sunday to Thursday. And what I do is I just like wake up really early in the morning, like 4 or 5 o'clock, and I drive in home, do the show, drive back out to the campsite. So, and meet up with Ann and the dogs. So we're doing that tonight, but we're going to be cuddled up in the camper, going to have Game of Thrones on. We're going to watch House of the Dragon tonight from the campsite. I'm so stoked. Oh, I'm so stoked for tonight's episode. Everybody's saying it's going to be absolutely crazy, and I cannot wait to watch it. All right, guys. With that all down, let's move on now, shall we? And get to the real reason that we're here, which is to take your live comments and questions. So let's not waste any more time and get into it here, shall we? And we're going to get things started here with Casinema. First of all, Film 101 just sent in a little super chat badge to be supportive. Thank you, Film 101. So Casinema writes, I love all 3 Quiet Place movies equally, but I think Day One is easily the most intense of the series, and the lightning scene was so powerful. I disagree. I still think Part 1 was the most intense. Like the tension in Part 1, whether she's like giving birth in the bathtub or the walking down the stairs onto the nail or all that kind of stuff. I still think Part 1 was the best of the 3 and probably the most intense. Day One, I think, is my least favorite of the 3 Quiet Place movies, but I still really liked it. Like I thoroughly enjoyed it. I still think the order of quality is like Part 1, then Part 2, and now Part 3, but I really enjoyed it. That lightning scene was great. And the ending I thought was chef's kiss. I thought it was an absolutely perfect ending. Absolutely loved it. All right. Next up. We've got another one for Cinema who writes, also, have you seen the trailers for the survival horror game called A Quiet Place, The Road Ahead? Looks pretty good. No, I have not seen that yet, but I've heard a lot of people mention it. So I'm going to go and see if I can find a trailer for that because a lot of people have mentioned it, but I have not seen it yet. All right. Next up, we got Andy who writes 1 of 2. Hey, John. Here's an update for June. Oh yeah, because you've been like keeping up with a lot of the movies. I saw 8 films that came out last month. And two of them, Ghostlight and Thelma, were original films. In the first half of 2024, I've seen 48 films that came out. That's awesome. So far, and 28 of them, 58%, were original films, and they were original films that I cared to see. I'm glad you mentioned that, Andy, because it's still a discussion that comes up all the time. No matter how often I talk about it or whatever, it's still a discussion that comes up all the time, which was that there's still constantly people say Hollywood doesn't make original films anymore. Yeah, they do. Not only are the majority of films that continue to come out original films, but there is more original film. This is a statistical fact. This isn't a subjective opinion. This is statistical fact. There's more original films that come out today than any other time in history. Now, all of us as fans tend to talk about franchises and reboots more because we know those, right? We recognize them. So we are more likely, if we're to have a quick movie discussion, we're more likely to talk about Top Gun Maverick than we are about F1. You know, the trailer for the new Brad Pitt racing movie, F1, came out today. But we're more likely in a general conversation to bring up Top Gun Maverick because we know Top Gun, right? We're all associated with Top Gun. We recognize Top Gun. There's a familiarity with it. It's a part of our, pop cultural lexicon already. So there's that. But people confuse things that get more attention, which is natural that they get more attention because there's a familiarity with them, versus what actually is being made. People may talk more about franchises and sequels, but the reality is there's more original stuff than ever before. So I'm glad you brought that up, Andy. And I'm glad you're continuing to keep up your streak. All right, next up. Andy, another one, two-parter. Part 1. The Boys Season 4, Episode 6 was wild and funny, and I get why everyone talks about its humor, but what really and terrifyingly stood out to me the most was the discovery of the internment camps and planned destruction of democracy. It's even more eerie that the episode came out on Independence Day and that after what recently happened on Monday, July the 1st. Again, listen. This is what I've been saying about The Boys ever since I saw the first 2 episodes of season 1. On its surface, right? On its surface, it's this raunchy, juvenile, frat kind of humor and shock cinema and all that kind of stuff. But again, once you move past the Kevin Smith rapper, which is already great by itself, you realize there is a Shakespearean kind of depth to the characters. Every single character has their own unique journey and stories going on with subplots that are engaging and wonderful. Acolyte, take notes. Not that I'm trying to get into the Acolyte. But their storylines are great. They touch on what's going on in the real world. And it's just a brilliantly done show. And you're right. It's once you look past the shock humor, fart in that cake. Did a 5-year-old come up with that? It's hilarious. But once you get past that and you understand the interior trauma going on with Firecracker, the background pain and the motivations of Sister Sage, the constant manipulation of the most powerful force on Earth. Well, second most powerful force on Earth. Soldier Boy is the most powerful force on Earth. But the second most powerful force on Earth, Homelander. Because, once you get past all that and you get into that stuff, even Huey dealing with the death and loss of his father and the consequences of his actions. It's just such a brilliantly done show, man. Such a brilliantly done show. All right. Next up. Thanks for that, Andy. We go to Dexter, who writes, "Hey, John, I wrote in for the first time recently. Thank you for that. My question was me whining about Star Wars, so I want to take a page from your book and talk about something that I love instead. That's all. Hey, listen, it's fine to complain. Just don't become somebody that does nothing but complain, right? Because we've seen blogs and channels and podcasts that that's all they do, right? They just cry and complain. Just don't be that. There are going to be things to complain about. But yeah, try to balance that out with something positive. So Dexter writes, I recently rewatched Dredd. So good. It's one of my all-time faves, but it tanks so hard and sadly no sequel. Did you like it? Thanks, man. Yeah, we've talked about Dredd on this show like quite a bit. And I don't know if I have it here. I'm going to see if I can find it. But Dredd was one of those movies that looked terrible. It did. It looked terrible. The marketing campaign for it was really not good. And I remember, some of you have heard this story before. I remember I got contacted by the studio behind Dredd. And this is back when I stopped doing this a couple of years ago. I used to do a panel at Comic-Con every year. They still ask me to do it every year. Called the Masters of the Web panel. And the studio got in touch with me and said, hey, can Carl Urban come and be the guest on your panel this year? And they also asked me if I would be willing to moderate the first screening of Dredd. They were going to do the very, very first screening of Dredd at Comic-Con. And they asked me, can Carl Urban be on your panel? Can he be your special guest this year? And then will you come and moderate the Q&A and introduce the first fan screening we're going to have in there? So I at first said, let me think about it, because in my head I thought no. And the reason I was going to say no, and the reason I said I'll have to think about it, is because the movie looked bad to me. And I will not lie to my audience. Like, I'm not going to pretend like I like something if I don't. And I'm not going to pretend that I don't like something if I do. And I just thought to myself, this movie doesn't look good. So I was still at AMC at the time, and I talked to the guys at AMC, and they said to me, well, just be honest. Just ask questions, ask questions and talk about things, but don't reveal. You don't have to crap talk it. Just don't lie. Just don't say you liked it if you didn't. So I'm like, okay. So the day we were going to do the first screening, earlier in the day, we did the panel. So I hadn't seen the movie yet. I hadn't seen Dredd, and Carl came on the panel. And I got to tell you, I had an absolute blast with Carl. He was all day. Carl was absolutely wonderful. He was funny and friendly and just was great to hang out with all day. And so then later in the evening, I thought, well, I hope the movie's good then. I really hope this movie's good. So later, went down to the theater and, did the movie. We watched the movie and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And I could not believe they had botched the marketing on it so badly that they absolutely killed the marketing, because the marketing in that movie was awful and pretty much killed it. And it flopped at the box office. Nobody went to go see it. And it's really a damn shame, because the movie is a hell of a lot of fun. And why am I freezing on the name of the actress who played Cersei in Game of Thrones, and she plays Mama? She's the villain. I just literally said her name the other day, and now I'm freezing it. Guys in the live chat, who plays Cersei in Game of Thrones? But Lena Headey, yeah, she was the villain in the movie as Mama, and she was awesome as the villain. Heath Ledger, Carl Urban was fantastic. The movie is great. If you have not seen Dredd, I really highly encourage you to go check it out, because it's a lot of fun. It's R-rated, super violent, but Carl Urban rocks in it, and it's really, really good. All right. Thanks for bringing that up, man. Next up, we've got Raymond Verada who writes, it's great that Axel F brought back the classic songs. Completely agree. From the first 2 movie soundtrack albums, like Top Gun and other 80 movies, the songs are a part of it. It just really did such a good job of making it feel like having that music play. Because what is it? Neutron Dance? Is that the song? Anyway, having those, or shake down, break down, you busted. I mean, just having that play, it just makes it feel like you're back home again, right? It makes it feel like you're watching a Beverly Hills Cop movie. Music, and you're right about that, Raymond, music has an incredible power to really do that. All right, Dwayne writes, hey, John, Joseph Kosinski's F1 movie trailer just dropped today. Yes, it did. It looks great. It has Brad Pitt and Javier Bardem, but the crazy thing I read from Deadline is that it has a budget of $300 million. I don't believe that. Maybe it's like $300 million production and marketing and everything in the world, but I don't believe that movie cost $300 million. I'm not saying I'm definitely believe you're telling the truth that you saw that. I'm just saying whoever wrote that, I don't buy that. I don't buy that for a split second. Now, the trailer was really quite good. I mean, it's just a first trailer, right? So I don't expect you to tell me what the plot of the movie is or whatever in the first teaser trailer. But you know what I totally felt when I was watching it? I just mentioned the movie a minute ago. It totally has Top Gun Maverick vibes, right? Like the trailer itself, just, it takes you in, just like a lot of stuff for Top Gun Maverick that like brings you into the cockpit, right? And you feel that intensity of being in those fighter jets from the interior of the cockpit. It's very visceral and it brings you right into it. I got that same feeling watching this trailer, like taking you right into the driver's seat of these cars, the intensity of it, the speed of it. I got to tell you, man, I thought it was really good for a first teaser trailer. I thought it was really good. I look forward to seeing more. All right. Thanks for that, Dwayne. Next up, Dildar, the Glorious writes, I really enjoyed Axel F. It's not going to win any awards, but it was fun watch to kill 2 hours. Then they announced Beverly Hills Cop 5 and I can't wait for it. I must have been unplugged for the last couple of days. Did they really announce that they're going to do another Beverly Hills Cop? They're going to do Beverly Hills Cop 5 now? Color me surprised. I mean, listen, it's such a fun movie. And I would love, if they're going to do it to this quality, I would happily sit down to watch another one. I would be happy to sit down and watch another one. So I hope it's true that they're going to do that. All right. Let's see. Next up, we've got Jimmy Anderson, who sends in a $20 super chat. Thank you, Jimmy. And Jimmy writes, I really look forward to 28 years later. I would really like to know what happened to the kids in Weeks Later, but they might be old. Weeks Later is still one of the best zombie movies. Yet, well, I think 28 Days Later is better than 20. To me personally, 28 days is better than 28 weeks. But I know a lot of people feel the opposite. That's fine. I don't think this is going to be following the same kids. Now, I don't know that for sure, but I don't think it's going to be following the same family, the same kids. I think it's just going back to the world. I think it's kind of going to be like, you know how Quiet Place Day One is still the events of Quiet Place, but it's now told from a totally different perspective and a totally different place with totally new characters, other than Jaimon Hansu, who shows up. So I think Alton Wong says, now do a prequel, call it 28 seconds later. So but I have a feeling that it's probably not going to follow the same characters. Now, we've heard that we might see a familiar face popping up here and there, but I don't think he's going to be a main character, a certain Oscar winner. But yeah, I really think for the most part, they're going to be following. But I don't know that for sure. I could be wrong, but that's the way I think they're going. But I got to tell you what, I'm kind of looking forward to it. I'm really kind of looking forward to it to see how it all turns out. All right. Next up, Dwayne writes, John, Canada are in the semifinals of Copa America. They play Argentina for the second time on Tuesday. Hope they got this. Will you watch the match? I will absolutely be watching it. They will absolutely lose, and that's totally fine. Like the fact that they got to the Final Four, they got to the semifinals, nobody thought they would. I'm not the biggest soccer fan in the world. Everybody knows that, but I'm definitely a Canada fan. And so I was watching the game against Venezuela when they got that fluke. It wasn't a fluke. It was a brilliantly placed kick. But when the guy like kicked it basically from midfield over the goalie's head, crazy. But, and send it into penalties. But listen, they're going to face Messi, maybe the greatest soccer player of all time. And they're going to lose, probably, to Argentina. And that's okay because they've already accomplished so much. Super proud of them. And yeah, I will definitely be watching Team Canada play. All right. Raymond Verado writes, did you see the Brad Pitt F1 teaser? It's the Top Gun Maverick. I just made that comparison. It's the Top Gun Maverick of racing car movies, new camera angles of how you view the high-speed races. Yeah, again, I immediately felt the Top Gun Maverickness of it, but it really works. Now, less people say they were copying Top Gun Maverick. They were filming this movie before Top Gun Maverick hit theaters, so I think they're good there. But yeah, I mean, it looks really good. Now, again, it was just the first teaser. It gave nothing about story or anything away. So I don't know, maybe the story is going to be dumb, maybe it won't. But the intensity of it, they can make the movie feel like that. I'll definitely be down. I mean, it's weird that they put out a teaser for it this early. I mean, I don't know what the point was for them to put out a teaser this early. Everybody's going to will forget about this teaser in a month or two. So I don't know why, but still, just talking about the teaser, I thought the teaser was really, really good. All right. Next up, Isaac Martinez writes, hey, John, do you think the Brad Pitt's F1 movie would be better than Rush and Ford v Ferrari? Don't get me wrong. I love both of these films. It's impossible to say. Both Rush and Ford v Ferrari are wonderful films. Wonderful films. I like both of them very much. It is impossible to say whether that'll be as good as or better than those movies based on some camera shots that we saw in the first teaser. I need to see more from the movie before I can venture a guess as to how good I think the movie will be. But I'll just say this. If it can be as good as Ford v Ferrari and Rush, it'll be doing pretty damn well. So let's just say that for now. All right. Thanks a lot for that, Isaac. Next up, Lou writes, this hurricane better not cut my power and make me miss House of the Dragon. It's important that we all have our priorities, Lou. In all seriousness, I haven't been following the news of the hurricane much, but for any of you guys watching and listening, if you are going to be in any impacted areas, bunker down, take care of yourselves, and see if you can maybe juice up some a solar battery or something so you can power your television and still watch House of the Dragon. But in all seriousness, guys, take care of yourselves and take care of the people around you, shall you? All right. Best of luck with that, Lou. I hope you get to see the show tonight. All right. Robert Presser writes, hope you're having a great weekend. I am having a great weekend. Thank you for all the hard work you and the crew do. Oh, thank you so much for that, Robert. It's always nice when people just want to write in and be supportive. I appreciate that. Yeah, I actually had a great time. We've had a great weekend. I got to play some poker this weekend. We spent a lot of time with Anne's family. Last night was great. Do you guys remember about a couple of years ago, we had a guest on the show. His name's Spencer, and because he's a member of IATSE, he's a set designer, and we had him on to talk about the possibility of an IATSE strike, not the one going on right now, but the one from a couple of years ago. And we had him on. I don't know if some of you guys Michael's saying you remember that. So, and you're right. James Diesel is saying he was super informative. He was awesomely informative. He was great. He really laid out all the issues and everything. Anyway, last night was wonderful because him and his wife, Lara, who's one of Anne's best friends, And she's also a member of IATSE because she is a set photographer. She's a publicity set photographer. So what she does is like, she's the photographer behind the scenes of all these movies and Netflix shows and all this kind of stuff. So they can make promotional material out of it. She's a professional photographer. That's what she does. So she's in IATSE as well. So last night, Spencer and Laura and their beautiful little girl, Reika, came over to swim in the pool and just hang out for the night. And Reika is just a bundle of joy and awesomeness. I love having her in the house. She's just running around and giggling all day. We had a great time doing that. Today, Anne is off at that accursed Disneyland place with her friend Kat. So the girls are having a day at Disneyland right now. And then later today, we're going to go camping. So I've had an awesome weekend, and I get to do open mic today too. So it's been an awesome weekend. Thank you for asking. All right. Next up, we got AC23 who writes, director of Deadpool 3, that's Sean Levy, mentioned cameos don't serve the story of the film. It's not exactly what he said. We'll get to that in a second. Okay. Don't serve the story of the film, more for quick pops. You previously mentioned that you're not a fan of this. Thoughts? Okay, no. What specifically he said was, and I'm going to paraphrase what he said, because, okay, let's back up for a second. I don't mind cameos, and cameos in movies can be great as long as the cameos serve a purpose, right? As long as it's not the car driving by on the street and a guy on the sidewalk going, hey, you're driving too fast. And it's just somebody who recognizes, oh, there's a cameo, but it was literally pointless, right? Exception for Stan Lee cameos in Marvel films, because just Stan Lee being there is in and of itself meaningful. So aside from that, I'm not talking about Stan Lee's cameos. But I personally really prefer it when a cameo doesn't have to be a part of the overall plot, but as long as the cameo at least does something to further a scene, like there is a narrative function, like character needed to get from point A to point B. Our main hero needed to get from point A to point B. Cameo shows up in a cameo and facilitates the getting from point A to point B. Like, I don't necessarily appreciate the cameos that are just, hi guys, you know me, bye, and then they're gone, but rather they do something to serve a function. And what Sean Levy said is the cameos will all serve a function. It's just that, the cameos are not a part of the main plot of the film. And I'm fine with that. I'm totally fine with that. As long as each time, like just from that trailer, we got Taylor Maine playing Sabretooth, that's clear. There's a purpose for that. It's a key part of a scene in the movie. It may not be a key part of the overall plot of the movie, but it's a key part of the scene. As long as a cameo serves a function, then I'm okay. You know what? This is a great example. Ross, there's a cameo in the function with, I never remember how to say his name. Pierce Brinoche, cousin Balky from Perfect Strangers, right? So he pops up in the movie, but there's a purpose for it. They need somebody to get them into that house so they can scope out the house next door. So that is a perfect example to me and a perfect use of a cameo, right? It had nothing to do with the overall plot, but they needed something. Axel and team needed something here. Insert cameo appearance to facilitate them getting what they needed. That is a perfect use, textbook perfect use of a cameo. And so if they can do that with their cameos in Deadpool 3, I'm totally good with it. I think it's perfect. All right. Next up, AC23 goes on and writes, John, I feel no build up for another Avengers movie. The Infinity Saga at least had threads. Now I have no idea about who or what for the next Avengers. This has been a constant criticism of Marvel since Endgame that a lot of fans have had, myself included to a degree. Like, the main important thing about a movie is not that it ties into its bigger universe, but that it's a good movie in and of itself. Ergo, Guardians of the Galaxy 3, fabulous. Even though it does really nothing to further the overall Marvel Cinematic Universe story, it in and of itself, the movie in and of itself was a great movie, big win. Shang-Chi doesn't really do anything to further the overall Marvel Cinematic Universe, but in and of itself, it's a great movie. That to me is the most important thing. And conversely, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, you could argue, was planting seeds and connecting threads, with Kang and the quantum realm about what could be a larger part of the MCU, but who cares that it did that because the movie's bad, right? It's like, okay, great. Oh, wonderful. Yay. Good for you. You were connecting some threads and planting seeds for a larger thing in the MCU. Yay. None of it matters if the movie isn't good in and of itself. That all being said, the constant criticism has been there's been even the constant joke, in Eternals, we had a Titan-sized creature starting to emerge from the Indian Ocean. I think it was the Indian Ocean. Emerging out of the Indian Ocean and then stopped, and now this giant head is sticking out, and it's never even been mentioned again, other than in a joke newspaper headline in She-Hulk. Other than that, it has never even been acknowledged that on our planet, some country-sized being, planetary-sized being, started to emerge out of the Earth's core. Its head got out of the ocean, and now this continent-sized head is sitting there in the Indian Ocean. Never been mentioned again. Never been mentioned again. Or how about, sticking with Eternals, Arishem the Judge. Hold on a sec. Huh? Arishem the Judge. Yes, I have an Arishem bobblehead. Shut up. So how about Arishem shows up over the planet and I am coming back to judge you. They're bringing judgment. Grr, right? And never been mentioned again. Never been mentioned again. I mean, Rob would often bring up and say things like, I don't know where any of this is going. And while I believe that the main most important thing is, of course, that each individual movie is good, they've struggled with that a bit too. You at least want to give, this is the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You want to have a sense of what we are building up to. And right now, we're a number of years in, and nobody has any, other than the fact that it'll have something to do with multiverse, which is stupid in and of itself. I think the biggest mistake Kevin Feige made was even deciding to make this next phase the multiverse saga. And I remember being at CinemaCon when Kevin Feige came out on stage and made the announcement, the next stage of the MCU is the multiverse saga. I went in my best David Chappelle voice, oh no, that's a bad idea, Kevin, because multiverse is stupid. But anyway, so you're right. Right now, we have no idea. Hopefully the next couple of films, I doubt Deadpool. Deadpool is just going to be a great movie. I really doubt Deadpool is going to do anything to push the MCU itself forward other than just to be hopefully a great movie in the MCU. I have a feeling, though, and I don't know this for a fact, I have a feeling that Captain America 4 will be a major point, a major turning point in the MCU as far as the direction the entire cinematic universe is going. We already saw in some of the footage they showed us at CinemaCon when Harrison Ford, playing President Ross, says to Sam, I want you to help me to put the Avengers back together again. So right now there are no Avengers. So I think that's giving us a little hint that Captain America 4 will be a key thing in starting to set up whatever the Avengers movie is going to be. At least it better. I certainly hope they do. All right. Next up, we've got Robert, who writes, we didn't want any of the cameos or characters to be the story. Oh, he's quoting Sean Levy. We didn't want any of the cameos or characters to be the story of the movie, Levy explains. They'll serve the movie, just not the main plot. That's exactly what I was just saying, right? That they don't have to be, cameos don't have to be there to be a key element of the overall plot, but serve the scene. Don't just pop up and go, hi, everybody, I'm the hot dog guy. No. Serve the scene. Make it that there's a reason that that character is there. And as long as they do that, and that's exactly what Sean Levy is saying they're going to be doing, as long as they do that, then yes, 100%. 100% I think it's perfectly good, and hopefully it will indeed serve the movie. All right. Next up, Sloan writes, all the critics that have reviewed the first 4 episodes of House of the Dragon have said episode 4 is epic crescendo to the first half of the season. All raving for this episode. Really looking forward to it, dude. I'm getting a boner. That gives me a boner as much as a man farting in a German cake. No, I'm super excited, dude. I am so excited for this episode tonight, because as soon as last week's episode ended and they played the preview for next week's episode, I'm like, damn. Oh, damn. This is going to be so good. I can't wait. All right. Thanks for that, Sloan. Next up. Will DLC just sends in a badge to be supportive. Thank you, Will DLC. Will also then goes on to write, after Ashley's line to Huey, I'll never look at asparagus the same way again, or skunks. The writing on this show is absolutely vicious. Here's the thing. You would think, and I've mentioned this before, you would think that with the amount of shock humor that The Boys has constantly engaged in since season 1, episode 1, that it would either lose its potency when they try to do it, or the novelty would wear off. And they never does. They constantly find ways. I'll give you an example. First episode of The Boys, right? Huey is walking with his girlfriend. It's this thing that starts the whole story of The Boys in motion. Huey's walking with his girlfriend out on the street, and a train literally runs right through her and explodes her body everywhere. And I remember the first time I saw that, I'm like, what? Like it was crazy, right? You remember that? Well, you would think that eventually that doesn't shock us anymore. But then, like last week's episode, Huey's dad, all pumped up on V, he comes flying through a wall and into another guy laying in his bed and then solidifying, making the guy's innards explode. And I'm like, ah! Even though we've seen years of this, they have figured out a way to constantly shock us. Ashley's dialogue is no different. Like, we've seen Ashley be a dirty little filthy perv, right? And again, filthy. We've seen Ashley be a filthy little perv, but like it never stops to astonish me. It never ceases to astonish me. It's crazy. All right. Thanks for that, Will. Next up, Robert writes, kind of funny how people are calling The Boys season 4 woke, even though they've dealt with those type of issues the whole show, Cough, The Deep, and Starlight. Oh, no, listen, we've talked about this before. I remember there was a headline, I think it was in Forbes, that read, some people, and I might be getting some of the wording wrong here, but basically, a couple of weeks ago, there was this big headline in Forbes that read, Some people just now realizing The Boys has always been about them. Listen, The Boys has not changed at all from season 1 to now. And I've said this before, the difference is in earlier seasons, even though you could clearly tell what they're poking fun at, it used to be a little more subtle. It used to be a little more subtle. And whatever. What has changed isn't the content or the material. The only thing that is different now is that it's a little less subtle about exactly what it is they're making fun of. For example, like the whole Vought on Ice scene from earlier in the season, when they're like saying, don't say happy holidays, it's Merry Christmas. Stand up for Jesus. It was just like so ridiculous. And I say this as a guy, you guys who watch me know that Christmas is my absolute 100% favorite day of the year. Christmas is a very meaningful time of the year to me. I love Christmas very, very much, both from a personal family perspective and from a spiritual perspective. Christmas is my favorite day of the year. But you are allowed to say happy holidays. And it's nothing like, anyway. So, or the guy who comes marching into Starlight saying, where are the kids? I know you're keeping kids captive here, which is directly right on the nose with what happened in real life. All this kind of stuff. The only difference is it's gotten less subtle. But because it's less subtle now, there are people who I guess failed to pick up on what The Boys has always been about and are now recognizing it. And I'm not here to argue the pros or the cons of it or that you should feel a certain way or you shouldn't. Not at all. I'm just saying there are people who are now kind of cluing into the fact that it's always been about a certain thing and it kind of turns them off. And I get that. I do. And it's so be it. All right. Next up. Let's see. Bobby Jackson writes, do you think cost is the reason why there is typically only one Dolby theater per AMC? I pretty much have to see a movie in the first week or two, otherwise risk it being in a crappy theater in week 3. You know what? It's funny you bring that up. I don't know if it was me and Jonathan or me and another friend of mine that were talking about this a few weeks ago. It's like, why is it that in most AMC theaters, there's only one Prime theater, one AMC Prime Dolby theater? Now, I think they have in the AMC Burbank 16, they have put in a second Prime theater, but it's not a Prime Dolby. So, and guys, listen, I'm not going to say who. I'm noticing in the live chat, you guys are bashing on some specific YouTubers. I ask you not to do that. That's not what my chat is for. We're not here to bash on individual YouTubers or people or whatever. So if you could just clear the conversation in a different direction, that would be great. Anyway, what was I even talking about before I got sidetracked there? I just totally forgot what we were even talking about. Oh, why there's only like the one thing in, there. I honestly don't know. And I was even at AMC theater. I was still working at AMC theaters when they started to introduce, when they started to introduce the Prime theaters, and it's still my favorite theaters, the AMC Dolby Prime. But I can only assume that you're probably right. It's probably an expense thing because those theaters are expensive. They're not cheap. Like even the technology in them isn't cheap. So I don't know that this is a fact. But my guess is that you're probably right. It's probably an expense thing, I would think. All right. Next up, Bobby again writes in, you mentioned one issue facing the Mandalorian movie is that it's only being available on Disney+. Do you think it would be a good idea for them to broadcast all the seasons on AMC prior to the film release? You know what? It wouldn't be surprising if they did. Because if you guys remember, before the Marvels came out, they decided to take Ms. Marvel, the show on Disney+, which is one of the few really good Marvel TV shows. Ms. Marvel is fantastic. I'll always defend that show. I think it's absolutely phenomenal. Not as good as WandaVision, but phenomenal nonetheless. And they took Ms. Marvel and did exactly that. They put it out on AMC or on ABC, but it was too little too late and the damage was done. Would they do that with their marquee show like The Mandalorian? I'm going to guess they won't. And part of the reason that I'm guessing that they won't is because they are desperately trying to get more people to sign up to Disney Plus. So it would be counterproductive to that purpose to then take the most marquee thing you've got, which is like the Mandalorian series, and just put it out on regular TV. Then it's like, oh, so I don't have to get Disney Plus. So I'm going to guess that they won't, but it probably wouldn't be a bad move if they did, but I wouldn't expect to see them do that, Bobby. Great question, man. All right. Next up, we've got, that's the end of the first half of the questions. All right, guys. With that down, we still got a ton more questions to get through. Just so you know, we probably have too many questions to get through. So I am turning off the super chats in about 15 seconds. So if you got another question or thought, go ahead and fire it on quick. We've already got way too many. But before we come back and get to the rest of the questions you guys have fired in, we're going to take a second and thank the sponsors of our channel this week. First of all, my mobile service provider, and they should be yours, Mint Mobile, and the good folks at BetterHelp. You know when you discover a new binge-worthy show or a song that you bump on repeat and you have to share it with your friends so they can experience just how awesome it is? That's kind of what it feels like when you discover that Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan. It's such an awesome deal, there is no way you can keep it to yourself. My last mobile service provider was quite good, but ever since I switched to Mint Mobile, I've enjoyed even better coverage, better phone clarity, and I'm paying less than a third of what I paid to my old provider. Say goodbye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all of your existing contacts. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month unlimited wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/Campea. That's mintmobile.com/Campea. Cut your wireless bills to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/Campea. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions may apply. See Mint Mobile for details. We want to thank a sponsor of today's episode, BetterHelp. You know, guys, it's one of the most unfortunate human tendencies that we have to try to compare our life to others. And social media plays a big part of that. Comparison is like the thief of joy, and it's easy to envy other people's lives because on the surface, it might look like they have it all together on their Instagram or YouTube, but in reality, they probably don't. Therapy can help you focus on what you want instead of what others have, so you can start living your best life. Give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. So get it off your chest with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/Campea today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Campea. And thank you to our friends at Mint Mobile and BetterHelp for sponsoring today's episode of Open Mic. All right, guys, with that down, let's get on to the next batch of questions you guys have sent in. And just to let you guys know, I have now turned off the super chats. I probably left them on a little longer than I should have. So you can't send in any more questions, but we'll take some questions from the live chat once we get through the rest of the questions you guys sent in on super chat, shall we? All right, we pick things up with Christopher Brickner, who writes, like many, one of two, I was expecting to see New Jedi Order in the sequels, but the sequels left the galaxy in basically the same place it was after Episode 6. With the New Jedi Order in the Rey movie over a decade since Episode 7, Lucasfilm took too long to get to it. Oh, I don't agree with that. And I don't care about the New Jedi Order anymore. Hopefully more fans aren't like me. I mean, listen. The reality is we had like decades in between Return of the Jedi and The Phantom Menace. I mean, it took a long time to get to that. look, listen, 95% of the average population has never heard of the new Jedi Order, right? They just really, it's really not important to the grand scheme of things. I just don't agree that they should be doing it with Rey, because Rey is a symbol. And again, I really like Daisy Ridley, and in principle, I really like the Rey character. I don't like some of the things they did with her, but Rey is a symbol of one of the most divisive eras in Star Wars fandom, which is, of course, the sequels. Only right alongside of the divisiveness of the prequels. Regardless, I really think what they should be doing with these new movies is moving forward. Like, move past Rey, move past all that kind of stuff, maybe jump ahead another 30 years. And in the next movie of the Jedi Order, talk about in it how this Jedi Rey reestablished the Jedi Order and started all that. And that's fine. That's fine. I just don't think they should be doing it with Rey. Because by doing it with Rey, the story isn't going to be the movies. The story is going to be how a whole bunch of people hate Rey. And I just think it's a mistake. Anyway, the storyline itself, it's not too late to go to a new Jedi storyline. Not at all. Not in the least. I just think they're not doing it the right way. But hopefully it'll be like Axel F, a movie I was not expecting much out of, but I ended up loving it. And maybe that'll be the next Star Wars movie with or without Rey. So we'll see how it goes. All right. Next up. We've got Christopher. Oh, I almost skipped over Noor, who writes, which Hulk do you think we'll see Wolverine fight? I don't think we're going to see Hulk fight Wolverine in it. Now, I know there have been whispers and some stories and some reports, and they might be true. I'm not saying they're not. I'm saying I don't think we will. Not going to be shocked if they do. So when you're asking which Hulk do you think we'll see Wolverine fight, I don't think we're going to see Wolverine fight a Hulk in it, despite whatever reports are going around right now. Now, in theory, though, if they did, I think it'll probably be the, damn it, what's the actor's name? I just had his name in my head. I just had his name. Who was the guy in the first Hulk movie? And he was in Eric Bana. Thank you. If it's and I don't think Eric Bana will be in it, but if we do see Hulk, and I don't think we will, but if we do, I think it'll probably be the Eric Bana Hulk. I don't think we'll see Eric Bana, but I think we'll see the Eric Bana Hulk if he's there at all. All right. Next up, Christopher Brickner also writes, Beverly Hills Cop 4 passed the very low bar of being better than Beverly Hills Cop 3. It would have been more impressive if it was worse than 3. Oh, I agree. It was not difficult being better than Beverly Hills Cop 3, but I also think it was better than Beverly Hills Cop 2. And listen, it got close to me to Beverly Hills Cop 1. I mean, Beverly Hills Cop 1, still the best Beverly Hills Cop movie, but I think Beverly Hills Cop 4 got surprisingly close to it. I was really, really pleasantly surprised by that movie, because after Coming to America 2, Christopher, I just got to tell you, I was not expecting much. So I'm really surprised. All right. Next up, Jerome writes, what's your opinion on comedies making jokes about men getting assaulted, like what just happened with Huey? Wouldn't be funny if it was female. There's two big dynamics with that. One is, and this is the most important part, it all depends on who's telling the joke. It is 90% about who's telling the joke. So for example, you guys know Daniel Tosh? He used to do Tosh.0. He's an incredibly funny comedian. He's also very, very progressive, very left, politically leaning, like super all that kind of stuff, right? And a lot of his jokes are completely the opposite of that. But because those jokes are coming from somebody like Daniel Tosh, those jokes play a lot funnier and not offensively. Whereas if they came from somebody who actually believed idiot stuff and then told jokes about it, it would probably come across differently. Or there are certain jokes black comedians can tell that other comedians couldn't tell. There are certain jokes that female comedians, like there's certain jokes Nikki Glaser can tell that Joe Coy couldn't tell. And as a Filipino, there's certain jokes Joe Coy can tell that other people maybe couldn't tell. So 90% of it is about who's making the joke. So like a joke being done, let's take the exact jokes that are being done in Tech Knight's dungeon with Huey. You can't tell those jokes in a Law and Order episode, for example, right? That wouldn't play well. Making a joke of something like that in a show like Law and Order, which is supposed to be serious and like actually, and then making jokes like the ones they're telling in The Boys there would not go over, would not do well, right? But in a show like The Boys, it totally plays different. There are jokes in The Office, Steve Carell's The Office, that you could not tell in Breaking Bad because it would come across as maybe really offensive. But in The Office, it totally just plays to the humor of it and it plays completely different. So I would say 90% of it, to answer your question, Jerome, is all about who's telling the joke, right? Who's telling the joke? I think that's most of it. The other part of it, and again, I think if The Boys showrunner was, say, Nikki Glaser, I mean, she's not a show producer or whatever, but just for argument's sake, if the showrunner and the person running The Boys was Nikki Glaser, like a woman who was the showrunner of The Boys, I think you could get away a lot more. I think Huey's character could have been Kimiko, or it could have been Starlight, or it could have been Maeve that was down there instead of Huey. But with it being Eric Kripke, he tells it with another guy being in that situation. Again, so there's so much subtlety to it. There's not a one size fits all answer to it. So I think a lot of it is about social ratios. And I think the biggest part about it is whatever kind of joke you're telling, it's all about who's telling the joke. And that's really the biggest thing. All right. Next question. Steven Gonzalez writes, have you ever watched the show The Shield? Oh yeah, I talk about it quite often with Michael Chiklis and Walton Goggins. It's really good and extremely relevant to what's going on these days with controversies surrounding cops. One of the great things about The Shield, which some people think is a top 3 greatest television show ever made. It's a profoundly great show. It was also very much ahead of its time. Right? It was because not a lot of shows back then or earlier dealt with, corruption or things like that with police and whatever. It's become almost stereotypical now, but The Shield was really helpful. Michael Chiklis is so good in it. It's Walton Goggins. Obviously, that's really the show that introduced a lot of people to Walton Goggins and who continues to be amazing today. So yeah, it was truly, truly an absolutely wonderful show. All right. Wait a minute. Generic white male, that's his username, is saying it was written by Kurt Sutter. Is that true? I honestly, if that's true, I honestly never knew that. Kurt Sutter is also the creator and the showrunner of Sons of Anarchy, one of my top 3 favorite television shows of all time. But did Kurt Sutter, is that true? Or is that a comment I'm taking out of context? No, people are saying, yes, it is. Oh my God. I never knew that. I never knew. How did I not know that Kurt Sutter wrote The Shield? Or was at least a writer on The Shield? Okay, and that's Brendan saying he was one of the writers. Okay. Still, that's pretty awesome. That's pretty great. I never knew that. Okay. Thanks for sharing that. Next up, Jerome again writes, I think Frenchie being in prison is going to be important because of how Tech Knight revealed, I was thinking this exact same thing, Jerome, because of how Tech Knight revealed his company owns the prison, at least a prison chain, and it's part of Sage's plan. Well, first of all, it was never part of Sage's plan for Frenchie to show up in prison, right? Because that was Frenchie's decision. That was a result of Frenchie's own inner turmoil and his damage and all that kind of stuff that ultimately led to Frenchie turning himself into prison. What is funny, though, in the show is that, okay, he's in prison, but he's never had a trial. Let's overlook that for a second. But yes, 100%. As soon as Tech Knight started talking about his family owns these prison chains and all this kind of stuff, I thought this is going to come into play. Now, we might be right or we might be wrong, but I was thinking the exact same thing, Jerome. All right. Next up, we've got 24K Logan, who writes, do you think we deserve a biopic on Tupac Shakur done correctly? Also, I start film class at Full Sail University in the fall. That's awesome. I love hearing people deciding to follow their passion going into film school. Here's the thing. Normally, and you and I don't know each other personally, 24K, so I'm not trying to make a commentary on you and yourself, okay? I'm just talking about generally speaking. When people say they want something done correctly, what they're actually saying is, I want it done in a way that reflects what I think. That's what is normally implied, right? So when somebody says to me, I want this done, but done right, I'll say, well, so what you're really saying is you want it done in such a way that reflects what you think. You want it done in such a way that reflects your beliefs. To you, that's what doing it right means. So I'm not quite sure what you mean when you say you want a Tupac Shakur biopic done right. I'll be honest with you. Everybody who watches my show knows this. I'm not terribly interested in biopics about musicians. Of course, I think Walk the Line was a great movie. Of course, I really, really like Bohemian Rhapsody. And I even really like the one they did on Elton John recently, Rocket Man. But I'm not really tremendously interested in movies about musicians. I'm more interested in like a biopic about a guy who created penicillin, like somebody who literally changed the lives of millions of people and made it possible for people to live. I'm more interested in like the biopics of the people who made it possible for mankind to go to the moon. I'm more interested in those types of things. So, I mean, all due respect to Tupac Shakur and any other musician that I really love, I'm not tremendously interested in biopics about musicians, to be honest with you. But that's just me. All right. Next up, Alex Von Gollum writes, one of two. Hey, John, how are you feeling about the Rings of Power Season 2? If showrunners learnt from their Season 1 mistakes and improved several aspects, the season could be something special. A heartfelt travel in Tolkien's world. I'm hopeful / excited about it, about the chance of it being really good and satisfying. Okay, look, so for any of you who don't know about this, like when they announced years and years and years ago that they were doing a Rings of Power series, it became my number one most anticipated series ever until they announced Shogun. That was different. But at the time, I could not have been more excited about a Lord of the Rings series. Then the show came out, and let's just say it left me disappointed. Now, I do not believe like some people like will lament on and on about how it's like one of the biggest pieces of garbage ever. It wasn't. It definitely had a lot going for it. There was good things about it, but at the end of the day and ultimately, I was left quite disappointed. Like it wasn't the Acolyte. It wasn't the Acolyte or anything like that, but it left me quite disappointed. But I've always said since it came out that if going in to season 2, and this is a common thing. Andrew Light writes, season 1 didn't follow any of the Middle Earth lore. then you don't know a lot of Middle-earth lore, because yes, they did. There's other things that they took liberties with and went in different directions, but there is much Middle-earth lore in season 1 of there just is. So that's factually incorrect, what you just said. Whether they did it well or not is a completely different discussion. Anyway, ever since season 1 came out, season 1 finished, I said this, okay, I can recognize and identify which things worked and which things did not. And it left me feeling, okay, if they take now the time in between seasons, like a football team in between Sundays sits down, watches the film, figures out what they did right, figures out what they did wrong, and identified the things they need to work on. If in between seasons, if they sat down and take a really good hard look at season 1, properly identify the things that really did work well, because there are a number of elements that did work quite well, and identified what went wrong with the elements that did not, and really took the right lessons away, put some care and attention. Listen, Amazon is clearly very committed to the show. They put out big money, big money. So they're very committed to it. So if they can really identify the things that caused the errors in their ways, if they can really identify where it came off the rails and what did not work and what wasn't functioning well, and if they really focused and honed their time in on correcting those mistakes, build up the things that did work well, and really correct those mistakes, considering the amount of money and commitment Amazon has for the series, yes, I agree. It could be very good. It could be very good. I'm not counting on it, but I am going into season 2 mildly, cautiously hopeful. I'm going to go into it cautiously hopeful. Because if they can do that, if they can bulk up the things that were working well and make major corrections to the things that were not, we could end up with a very good series on our hands. But that's a lot of ifs. That's a lot of chances. That's a lot of possibilities. So I would say right now, my status is cautiously hopeful. We'll see. We'll see how it kind of goes. All right. Next up, King Daddy Goat writes, do you believe Giancarlo is playing GE Bridge? So there's a report going out right now that he is. I don't know that I buy it. I have not, and listen, I haven't had a chance to really read into it and read up on what exactly people are saying, what the rationale is. Right now, my guess is no, but it's just a guess. I could totally change my mind tomorrow. Right now, my guess is no, but we'll see. All right. Next up, Kevin Cow writes, watched the new Netflix Axel F movie and I really enjoyed it. And I went back to watch the first 2 on Netflix. That's exactly, Kevin, what happened to my wife. She has never seen any of the Beverly Hills Cop movies, saw this new one, watched it and really enjoyed it. And the first thing she did yesterday when she had a couple hours, she went back, popped on Netflix and watched the original one and loved it. Really enjoyed it. It's funny how these new modern movies can actually drive the audience to the originals, much like remakes. Like, that's an argument that has come up as like, I will never understand. I know this is kind of a separate topic, but I will never understand this juvenile recourse to when they announced a reboot's being done. No, don't touch that movie. Why? Nobody has ever in the history of me doing this given me one legitimate reason why a remake shouldn't be done of a movie. They'll ruin it. That's funny. No, they won't. If they do a reboot and it's terrible, the original isn't touched. Do you hear anybody today? Anybody? Complaining about, I don't know, let's pick one. What's the Arnold Schwarzenegger one that Colin Farrell did a remake of? Was that Running Man? or was that a different one? Help me out in the live chat, guys. Which one was it that Colin Farrell, and remember Bryan Cranston was in it? It was no, it was Total Recall. That's what it was. That King Daddy Goat was first. Yeah, so remember they did Total Recall? And I remember when they announced that they were doing Total Recall, everybody was like, no, you'll ruin the original. It's going to ruin it. It's going to ruin it. Yeah. Guess what? Total Recall came out, the reboot, the remake. And I actually thought it was kind of okay, but it wasn't as good as the original, right? It was not as good as, I think we all agree it wasn't as good as the original. But guess what? It didn't tarnish the image. It didn't tarnish the perception. It didn't tarnish the legacy of the original film at all. As a matter of fact, the total opposite thing happened. When Total Recall, the reboot, came out, rentals and engagement over the original Total Recall with Arnold Schwarzenegger went through the roof. When Martin Scorsese's The Departed, which is based on my all-time favorite cop film, Infernal Affairs, came out, more people went to watch Infernal Affairs than in any time in its history. So even when you do a reboot that is totally awful, it does not ruin the original. If anything, it actually increases awareness of the original. It increases more people going back to watch the original. And the legacy of the original stays completely intact. Again, I have never once in my life heard anybody give me a legitimate reason about why they shouldn't do a remake. And then people say to me, well, John, would you still say that if somebody was going to reboot Star Wars? Yeah, I'd be totally fine with it. I mean, as long as they ended the Star Wars universe that they're doing now, if they end, like, you can't reboot Star Wars while you're still doing Star Wars in the same universe. So as long as they end Star Wars and they say, we're just going to reboot Star Wars in a couple of years, I'd be like, okay, I don't know if you'll be able to do it very well, but there's nothing wrong with taking a shot at it. Because if it's good, then we have another good movie. And if it's bad, oh, well, we still have the originals. So, yeah, I have never to this day heard one legitimate reason or argument backed up by fact or statistics that have ever legitimately made a case about why somebody shouldn't make a reboot of something, no matter how good or bad the original was, because absolutely no harm comes to the original regardless. Anyway, that's just how I got sidetracked there, Kevin, on you asking me a question about Axel Foley. All right. Next up, Cookie sends in a $20 super chat. Thank you for that, Cookie. And Cookie writes in, John, do you think the next Avengers called Doom Wars? I don't think it'll be called Doom Wars. Also, is there a dream film you want to get made? Yes. For me, it's Mel Brooks' Deadpool film. I love the Deadpool films. Just want to see how Mel would do it. That's actually, I never thought about that. That's pretty cool. Yes. No, I don't think it'll be called Doom Wars. We haven't even met Dr. Doom yet, so no. I mean, I'm not saying it's not possible. Let me be clear about that. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's possible, but I don't think it will. The dream movie, and some of you in the live chat might know what I'm going to say, because you've probably heard me say this at some point before. The dream movie for me is and always has been a Steven Spielberg directed Star Wars movie. That has always been my dream. Because number one, Steven Spielberg is the greatest filmmaker of all time, but also, and maybe even more importantly, of his very close relationship with George Lucas, his understanding of the Star Wars universe. If you watched some of the bonus features on the Revenge of the Sith DVD when it came out, Steven Spielberg actually did some of the choreography and kind of like second unit directing on the fight scene on Mustafar between Anakin and Obi-Wan. Like, he was actually involved in the film. He's not put on the credits, but if you watch the special features, you saw that he was involved in that. So yeah, to me, my all-time dream movie project, Cookie, it'll never happen. It'll absolutely never happen. But it has always been to see Steven Spielberg direct a Star Wars movie. 100%, that's always been my dream one. It'll never happen, but I wish it would. All right, next up. R. Lee writes, Bad Boys, Ride or Die, A Quiet Place Day 1, Inside Out 2, Dune Part 2, Deadpool 3 coming. All movies doing well. Dare I say, is the box office back? Listen, I mentioned this on the John Campea Show the other day. We, as movie fans, and I mean all of us, are extremely recency influenced. One or two movies go bad. For example, two really great movies, but both completely flopped at the box office. Furiosa and Fall Guy, right? So two movies come out and completely fall on their face and flop. And everybody's conversation is, the movie theaters are dead. Nobody goes to the movies anymore. The theatrical experience is over. After a couple of movies. By the way, which is something that a lot of you guys pointed out yourselves in 2023, and Rob and I talked a lot about in 2023, that due to the strikes and that the Hollywood was shut down for months, the first part of 2023 is going to be really tough going because so many big movies got delayed. So many other movies that were even already done pushed their release dates. We literally had weeks at a time in the movie theaters when there was no new releases coming out in the first half of 2023. Everybody said, you guys said it, we said it, that it was going to be very rough going in the first part of 2023. Now, with numerous pleasant surprise little hits, hell, even the Garfield movie has like quadrupled its production budget. Bad Boys, obviously Dune made a massive amount of money for the kind of movie it is. Quiet Place has had a stunning thing. Inside Out is breaking records. Deadpool 3 is projected to break all kinds of records. Despicable Me just had a huge opening weekend at the box. I think they said it's came in at like 120 million for its opening holiday stretch. I think Moana is going to do fantastic. I think The Joker is going to do extremely well. But here's the thing. Just like I caution us about being recency influenced when everybody after Fall Guy and Furiosa was going, it's all over, the box office is dead, because a couple of movies in a couple of months went bad. I would also caution us on the opposite, which is, Inside Out is destroying box office records. Deadpool 3 is going to be massive at the box office. You know, a number of smaller films all doing really well. But that's all happening right now. Let's not do the opposite and go, everything's good now. The box office is stronger than ever. Viva la theater. Like, let's not think that everything is now fixed. Just like everything hadn't gone to crap just because a few movies in a certain couple of periods of months did really badly. A couple of really good movies in a couple of really good months doesn't automatically mean everything's perfect again and we're back to pre-pandemic engines firing on all cylinders thing. So let's not get too worked up negatively, but let's also not get too worked up positively and proclaim that everything is back to the way it should be. Let's see how everything is still going once we get into, October, November, December, and even more importantly, how things are still going once we get into January, February, and March. If everything is still firing on all cylinders by the time we get through the whole summer, all the fall, into the next year, then maybe we start having that conversation that the box office is back. We are back. Everything is back. It's too early to call, though, right now, I think. Too early to call. All right. Next up, we've got Jerome, who writes, I think The Boys is setting up an ending similar to how the comics ended, with everybody having to stop Butcher from wiping out the soups. I don't know that they're going to do that. I do think ultimately, and listen, what I'm about to say is something that was in the comics, and we've seen many things that were in the comics that they didn't do in the show, so this may not even come to pass. Now, in the comics, you know, Homelander kills the president, he takes over the White House, big, huge coup, and ultimately, the way they kill Homelander is Black Noir. Ultimately, Black Noir in the comic books is the one that kills Homelander. Now, this is a huge departure from the comics, because in the comics, because obviously in the show, Black Noir is dead, right? Homelander killed him. In the comics, it turns out Black Noir was a slightly more powerful clone of Homelander. But nobody knew that because Black Noir always had the mask on, right? So in the comics, Black Noir is a slightly more powerful clone of Homelander that was Vought's like failsafe, just in case they couldn't control Homelander anymore. And so like he kills Homelander. Now, obviously, that is not the direction they've gone in the show. Black Noir was not a clone of Homelander in the show. Black Noir is not going to be the one to kill Homelander because he's not even alive anymore. So there's going to be massive, massive departures. So just because certain things happen in the comics, and by the way, I honestly think The Boys, Rob and I have both said this. I honestly think this is one of those situations where the show or movie is actually significantly better than the original source material. And I say this as somebody who's always liked The Boys, but I actually think the show is superior to the comics. That being said, it's very difficult to say what will happen in the show relying on information that was in the comics, because they've already departed so much. They've already departed so much from the comics, so it's hard to say. Anyway, all right, good question, Jerome. Next up, R. Lee writes, Axel F., if you have Netflix, no excuse, watch it. I 100% agree with it. I mean, again, it's a movie, no movies for everybody. It might not be for you, but I definitely think it's worth a chance to roll the dice and go watch it, because I had a really good time watching it, and I had my doubts. All right, Dildar the Glorious writes, the discourse with Star Wars has been out of control lately. Even saw people on Twitter saying they were banning their kids from watching it. Like, what the hell? Listen, I'm not going to go into the whole thing again, but what is very funny and ironic to me is that the people who accuse Hollywood of bringing politics into the movies are actually the ones bringing their politics into movies. George Lucas has always, like, here's the thing they'll never want to talk about out loud or acknowledge. Like, George Lucas always made Star Wars about politics. George Lucas has talked a lot about both the original series and the prequels. It was all based on politics and global events and the political natures of this and that. Like, George Lucas was very politically motivated making his Star Wars movies, both the originals and the prequels. Star Wars, as Jose in the live chat just said, Star Wars is political. It always has been. The irony of the people accusing Hollywood of bringing politics into movies, which art is always a political thing, right? Whenever you have an artist making something that is their point of view on the world the way it is, the world the way it was, or the way the world could be, there's inherent political viewpoints in that. Always has been, always will be. What is actually happening is there is a certain segment that they are the ones themselves bringing their politics into art. Their politics. Because as long as the art they're watching validates their political view, they'll never say anything about having a problem with a movie or a piece of art bringing in politics, as long as it's their politics. As long as it's their politics, everything's good. No complaints. But if a movie, as movies have always done, have something in it that doesn't line up with their political ideology and agenda, then it's the movies bringing politics into things. No, it's not. It's you. You're bringing your politics into this discussion. None of us were talking about politics. Right? None of us were talking about politics of the movie. None of us were discussing it. You're the one who is constantly bringing your politics into our film communities. You're the one bringing politics into the online discussions. You're the ones bringing politics. And as long as it's a fringe movie or TV show that's your politics, everything's good. But whenever it's not, you're the one bringing culture wars into everything. I never talk about politics on my show. Why? Because art is artists expressing themselves through the way they see the world, the way it is, the way it was, and the way it possibly could be. Whether it's in drama or comedy or fantasy or whatever, that's always what it is. So I never care about the politics in it. Oh, but there are people who do. There are people who do. And they want to make their political agenda and ideology the topic of conversation. And they base their entire blogs and their entire podcasts and their entire YouTube channels all based on that premise. We're going to talk about our political ideologies and how not enough movies are reflecting our political ideologies. Meanwhile, I don't hear anybody else talking about political ideologies in their movies. I don't hear it. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I don't hear everything, but anyway, it's always funny. I just find it hilarious that the people who are the ones complaining about politics in movies, they're the ones bringing politics into movies, and it's rather hypocritical. Anyway, all right, next up, HV3 writes, how did Despicable Me 4 already pass Inside Out 2 worldwide? It only had a domestic $75 million opening weekend. It did not. It did not. What are you talking about? Despicable Me, Inside Out has already crossed $1 billion. Despicable Me 4 has not. So I don't really know what we're talking about. That definitely has not happened. HV3. I don't know where you got that information from, but it has definitely not happened. It did not pass $1 billion already. All right. Next up, Logan Vaughn writes, any predictions on possible deaths in House of the Dragon tonight? By the way, I'm calling it Hot D in my head now. Yep. Was that Paris who coined that? It's Hot D. That's House of the Dragon. It's Hot D. Man, I don't know. I mean, I would love it if Sir Kristen died, but I don't know that he will. I mean, I hope Sir Malcolm is saying Damon. I hope it's not Damon. I mean, again, I didn't read the books. I will never read the books, but I don't know, man. I really don't. Maybe no key people die. Maybe a lot of them do. By the way, thank you, Matthew. Matthew pointed out my Stanley Cup, not the one I really want, the one for the Toronto Maple Leafs to have, but the Stanley Cup. You know what? I gotta say, and they are not a sponsor of this show. Sponsor me, you cheap sons of bitches, like Zevia. Anne has a Stanley Cup. And I saw it. And I was like, that's nice. And then I remember we were out. We were driving to Vegas. That's what it was. We were driving to Vegas. And she filled her Stanley Cup at home before we left. And we're driving to Vegas. And I was getting kind of thirsty. I said, can I have a sip of your drink? She's like, yeah, go ahead. So I take a sip and it was still ice cold, like 2.5 hours into the drive, still ice cold. And I was like, this is incredible. Now there are other cups that really hold well, but I was impressed with how long it keeps everything cold. But I love the size. Because what would happen is I'd be doing a show and I'd go through my drink really fast and then have to run around to refill my drink. This cup, I can literally fit 3. Not that I always do 3, but for a show like today, that's going to be over 2 hours and I'm doing by myself, I was able to put 3 full cans of Diet Pepsi into this cup with a giant ice cube. And it stays through the whole show completely ice cold. And it holds a huge amount. It's a very comfortable grip. I gotta tell you, man, I love this. Somebody also mentioned a Yeti. The Yeti. I have 1 or 2 Yetis as well. I really like them, but they're smaller than this. So I gotta tell you, I mean, I have some people joke, John's using a Stanley cup. Yeah, I'm a very pragmatic guy. I think this cup is great, and I highly recommend it. I think it's fantastic. Anyway, all right. Next up, we've got, who we got? We got Jake Vidmar, who writes, just started watching Shogun. Nice. And oh my God, this show is amazing. Best show of the year. It's incredible. They just killed the gardener. My jaw hit the floor. Just give this show all the Emmys now. I'll tell you what, whereas, you remember just a little bit earlier, we were talking about season 1 of Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, and how excited I was for that show and how enthusiastic I was for it. And then it just ultimately disappointed me. So going into Shogun, which I also had huge amounts of anticipation for, I was a little bit nervous because what if it ends up disappointing? Kind of like season 1 of Rings of Power did. Oh my God. It's one of the greatest shows I've ever seen. Now, I'm not going to put it into my top 3 favorite shows of all time list, which is Battlestar Galactica, Sons of Anarchy, and Spartacus. I'm not going to put it up there yet because it's only been 1 season. So I'm going to pump the brakes on that. I'm going to wait until after season 2 to see if it gets into my all-time, maybe bumps out one of those top 3. I mean, certainly not going to bump out Battlestar Galactica, but so I'm going to give it some time. But guys, if there are any of you who have not gotten on Shogun, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? Get on Shogun. It's one of the best shows you're ever going to see. One of the best shows you're ever going to see. All right. Next up, we've got Dwayne, who writes, hey, John, did you start The Bear season 3 yet? It's good. I have not. I have not started and already finished it, but I have not gotten on it yet. Again, I've been a little bit busy. And again, because they dropped all the episodes at once, I don't feel any urgency. Like, here's a great example. It's been a busy week for me, so I was a little late watching The Boys' new episode, but there's a sense of urgency for me to make sure I get on it and watch it because I want to be a part of the discussion that everybody's having about episode 6. And I really got to make sure I get on because the next episode is going to come out in 4 or 5 days. With The Bear making the horrendous mistake of dropping all their episodes at once, there's no urgency. There is no discussion about it because everybody's on different episodes. Like some people have watched 3 episodes. Some people have watched 5 episodes. Some people have watched 2 episodes. So there's no real discussion to be had about The Bear. And there's no urgency because, they just dropped all the episodes and no one's going to be talking about it in about 5 or 6 days from now. And The Bear is so good. At least the first 2 seasons are so good. I really don't know what possessed them to do the idiot thing of dropping the whole season at once because it's not going to be part of the pop cultural conversation now. When it's week to week, people will be talking about that show for months. And they dropped it all once, so yeah, I have no rush. We're not going to be talking about it on my show because we never talk about shows that drop all their episodes at once. And they're all there and I can just go and I don't have to make sure I watch the new episode before the next one comes out. So I am going to get around to watching season 3 because I love The Bear. But again, I just don't have any urgency to do it now. So probably in the next couple of weeks, I'll get around to watching it. All right. Next up. Technically, A Quiet Place Day 1 showed one thing new about the creatures, their nest, and what they eat, and there was one bigger than the others. Kind of yes, kind of no. Because we have no idea what it was they were eating. We saw them for the first time eat, but we have no clue what it was they were eating. Right? We like, they didn't go into anything. They've got a bit of a nest, but we kind of assumed there would be one. We didn't really learn anything about how they nest. We did finally see one that was a little bit different. Okay. But I mean, nothing about our understanding of them changed. And I really wish they did that, Jerome. I really wish they give us some insight into something about them because we're 3 movies in now and we still don't know anything about them. But that's just something I kind of wish they did. All right. Next up, we got Lowell who writes, updates on Netflix's Bioshock show. I haven't heard any. I don't even know if it's still happening. Development limbo. Wish Guillermo del Toro Nightmare Alley was attached. Older IP. Hard to translate to screen. Budget. Gives the feeling it's not happening. Thank you. Yeah, you know what? I think we actually talked about this. I want to say a few months ago. Somebody brought up Bioshock because I remember there was some announcement that they were going to be developing Bioshock, and I haven't heard a thing about it yet. Now, clearly, doing a Bioshock movie or show is going to be a very expensive endeavor. Like that, that is not going to be a cheap thing to do. But I honestly have heard nothing about whether this is something that's still being developed, if it's off the books now, if it's been scrapped, if they're moving forward. As soon as I hear anything, we'll definitely talk about it. But yeah, I haven't heard anything about it so far. So we'll keep our ears open. All right. It would certainly make a great piece of entertainment if they could actually turn it into a movie or show. All right. Next up, Revenge writes, what did you think of the F1 trailer? Personally, I wasn't a fan of the song selection, but I thought the visuals looked great. You know what? 100% agree with you. I really like the teaser. Did not like the song choice for the teaser. Didn't work. It's a great, classic, iconic Queen, whatever, but it did not fit in with the trailer at all. It didn't fit what the mood they were trying to set for the trailer. It was actually it's a great song, but it's the wrong song choice. Again, it's a question of fit. In art, you got to find the right pieces that fit together. And that was the wrong song choice for the trailer. Still, I quite enjoyed the trailer, but I completely agree with you, man. It was the wrong song choice, 100%. All right. Next up, Dwayne writes, have you ever had to tell a person who worked on a movie TV show that you didn't like it? Yes. Being in your line of work, I can imagine it can be awkward, especially if you're doing an interview Q&A. So there have been a couple of times that I've had to do it. The easier one is when it's friends of mine, because I've friends of mine who are filmmakers, and I've had to tell them, like, I didn't think this piece of work was your best, to be honest. I mean, that happens. But I think the one that caused the most awkward moment, and let me see if I can pull something up here. I'm not 100% sure I'm going to be able to. No, I'll be able to. Just give me a second to see if I can find this. But some of you guys may remember that Ann and I were both huge fans of Arrow, right? My wife Ann and I loved Arrow. And me and Ann did a little after show from our spare bedroom apartment. And one day we're doing our Arrow after show, and a bunch of people in the live chat. I don't know if some of you guys may have been there. If some of you guys remember this, we're doing the show, and a bunch of people started writing on the chat, John, Stephen Amell is trying to get a hold of you. And like a whole bunch of people started writing, Stephen Amell is the star of Arrow. I'm like, what are you talking about? They're like, check your Twitter. And then over on Stephen Amell's Twitter, it's like, somebody tell at John Campea, I'm trying to get a hold of him. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I DM Stephen Amell my phone number, and he calls me, and I'm like, I'm on the show, and Stephen Amell calls, and he's like, can I come in and do an episode of your show with you? So I'm like, sure. So Stephen Amell comes in to do the show. It was great. That's Stephen, me, that's Kaori, Anne's best friend. You guys, we've had Kaori on the show. You know Kaori. And the one pulling the hat over her face is Anne. And so we had Stephen on the show, and he was wonderful. I'm such a fan of this guy. It was absolutely, and there's a reason I'm telling this story, because it builds up to answering your question about having to tell somebody you didn't like something they did. So it was great. So like Stephen and I, we set up a time for him to come and do the show and all that kind of stuff. I got to see if I can find this one great picture of Corey. You know what? I'm not going to show you this particular picture, but yeah. So Stephen gives me a call. He gives me his address. I literally, I go over to his house myself. I picked him up in my car and then drove him down to there's Stephen and Anne, in a picture there, and picked him up, and he came and he did this episode of Arrow after show with us. And he was so great. Like in the whole car ride there, we did the show. He was fantastic. He hung out with us afterwards. We did a little after party thing with the show, and he just could not have been great. I will always be a massive, massive fan of Stephen Amell because, number one, I think he's really great, a wonderful actor. I love that he's going to be in the new Suits show. But also, he could not have been nicer. You know what? I've told the story before too, but like, Anne loves him. Anne totally loves him. And her birthday was coming up, and I fired Stephen Amell a note, and she said, Anne's birthday's coming up. Would you mind sending her a little message? And you know what he did? Seriously, he did not have to do this. This is how cool Stephen Amell is. I just dropped him this note, to saying, you know, it's Anne's birthday. Would you mind maybe sending her a note? I didn't know this, but he was on set in Vancouver shooting Arrow. And he, on his break, he went back to his trailer with like, cause you know, when he wears his Arrow mask, he's got the black makeup all on under the mask. He goes back to his trailer. This is when they were shooting the show. And in his trailer, still covered in all the makeup, recorded this full video of him like just wishing Anne a happy birthday. And he never had to do this. It's not like Stephen Amell and I were buddies. It's not like Stephen Amell had anything he could gain from me. Just a good Canadian kid, because that's how good Canadian kids roll. And he recorded this full, long, like 5-minute long happy birthday message to Anne and like thanking her for liking the show, blah, 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 and sent it directly to her. And like, it's just, dude, I didn't say this to him. I should. If you are in my good books forever. You are in my good books forever. And if you ever need any help with anything, I don't know what I could possibly help a Stephen Amell with. If you ever need help with anything, I will be there, because he was there for my wife. He was super awesome, super kind, very nice, all that kind of stuff. Now, the reason I tell you all of this, when you ask me the question about have I ever had to tell somebody that something they did I didn't really like, it was this day, because they had all, by the time Steven came on, they had already started to go into Laurel becoming Captain Buckles, which I love the Laurel character, but I hate it. You know what? She went to the Y and took some boxing classes a couple of times. She's a superhero now. And they gave her that stupid Captain Buckles outfit and all that kind of stuff. So doing this show, doing this episode, some of you might have seen this. I said, I can't remember what brought it up, but I said, dude, the second half of season 3 has been rough. Because this was right after season 3 ended, I think. I said the second half of season 3 was really rough. Lady Hotep saying Captain Buckles. Yeah, if you guys remember when Laurel kind of became the Black Canary, she had this black leather outfit that inexplicably had like 70 sets of buckles in inexplicable places, like buckles everywhere. Anyway, and I remember I said to Steven, who I love, and I loved the show, but I said to Steven on the show live, I said, basically, man, the second half of season 3 has been really rough. And and I remember said this, if your writers don't really fix this Laurel thing, I don't know that I'm going to be able to continue. Like, it's really bad what they're doing here. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep watching the show. And Steven looks shocked. He says, Jesus, like, dude, you're being pretty rough on me here. But I was completely honest, completely open with him. And I told him, yeah, dude, I don't know. I'm going to be able to continue watching the show. If it doesn't fix the mistakes of the second half of season 3, I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep watching the show. And because I'm always honest, okay? Maybe to a fault, and my opinions aren't always popular opinions. You may not always agree with me, but the one thing you can always know for sure is whether you like my opinions or don't like my opinions, my audience will always know they're my honest opinions. And even with somebody like Steven, who I adore, I had to tell him straight up, I don't like the way the season 3 has been going. I've been straight up with other celebrities too, whether it's how bad certain Netflix movies are or director friends of mine who directed a movie. Like, I'll be honest with you, like 2 buddies of mine, the guys who helped me meet my wife, Anne, Mark Neveldine and Brian Taylor, directors of the Crank movies, right? They did the second Ghost Rider movie. And I had to be honest with them. I was like, guys, the Ghost Rider 2 is not your best work. I mean, I love them as directors, but I was like, guys, Ghostbusters 2 is not your best work. So yes, I have, unfortunately, and I try to avoid these situations. I have, unfortunately, been in the past, been in positions where I've had to be honest with somebody. But so here's a great example of how I try to dodge having to lie. What's the name of the girl who played Cosette she was one of the Mean Girls, and she played Cosette in Les Mis, and I keep forgetting the girl, the actress. If any of you guys in the live chat know who I'm talking about and know the actress's name, please put it in the live chat because I'm freezing on it. But anyway, thank you, Haunted. Haunted knew it. I said I was so vague, and Haunted knew it. Actually, Double O and EJ did as well. Amanda Seyfried. So she had this little movie that came out a bunch of years ago, and it was about, I think, a girl who gets kidnapped or something like that. I can't remember the name of the movie. It was so forgettable, and it was really bad. So The night before I was going to do my interview with her, this was standard procedure. I had to go and watch the press screening of it. I'm like, okay, cool. Going to go watch this press screening. And I saw a press screening and I was like, oh, woof. This movie's rough. This movie's really rough. And I'm like, how on earth am I going to go in and interview her tomorrow? So I just pulled, I was the most generic interview I've ever done because I hated the movie. So in every question I asked, it had to be very general. I made the decision to do this. So I like asked her, in the movie, what was it about the script for you that appealed to you that made you think, yeah, this is the movie I want to be in? So nothing like, I didn't say, this movie's so great. No. I didn't say it. It was just like, so when you first read the script, what was it that appealed to you as an actress and compared to the things you've done before that made you want to be involved with it? And does this, and I say, you work with the director of so-and-so, like he's got a reputation for doing this and this. What was your experience like working with him? Blah, 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 blah. So I just asked these really, I hated doing it. And Amanda was delightful. I really liked her. She's delightful, but I hated doing that interview. And you know what? That interview was one of the reasons I stopped doing press junkets. And I just didn't go to them anymore and I started letting other people on the staff go because I wasn't interested in doing them anymore because I hated that experience of having to sit there. Because sometimes you get to sit down with him. Like when I get to sit down with Chris Pratt and like geek out about Guardians of the Galaxy because I loved Guardians of the Galaxy and get to geek out talking about Guardians of the Galaxy, right? But like, woof, I hated this movie and it's one of the reasons why I stopped doing press interviews and I stopped doing red carpets and I stopped doing all that kind of stuff because it was painful. It was painful. Anyway. All right. Next up, we got Badgero, who writes, Interview with the Vampire Season 2 was great. Listen, I keep hearing great things about Interview with the Vampire. The problem is I don't have AMC Plus or anything like that, so I've never had a chance to watch it. But like Ann and I were just talking about it like a week or two ago. It's like Anna's like, have you ever seen Interview with the Vampire, like the new TV show? I'm like, no, I haven't, but I have some of my viewers always saying it's good. So I've never had a chance to watch it, but I keep hearing, Barjo, really good things about it. All right. Next up, we got Dwayne. And Dwayne writes, the director of F1 also made Top Gun Maverick. Yes, he did, which might explain, Joseph Kaczynski, why it felt so much like Top Gun Maverick. Like with the interior shots, it felt great. It's got a good feeling to it. So hopefully it turns out well. All right. Generic Man writes, with WWE Raw going to Netflix in 2025 in the US, do you see Netflix pushing for more weekly live programming, sports or otherwise, if it's successful? 100%. And that's not a secret. Like that's something Netflix executives have openly discussed and talked about. They want to get into live sports. That's a huge money tree for broadcast, is live sports. That's why literally networks pay tens of billions of dollars just for the rights to show NFL football or to show NBA basketball or stuff like that, right? It's definitely something they want to get more into. And I think first of all, WWE is a big get in and of itself, but they're also going to look at it as a bit of a probably experiment. Probably a bit of an experiment. All right. Next up, let's see. Robble writes, wait, why did you think the multiverse was a bad idea all the way back at Comic-Con? Oh, I've always hated multiverse. A lot of you guys have heard me say this before. I'll try to keep it short. Multiverse to me is simply the laziest piece of nonsense you can bring into storytelling. Because multiverse means there's no consequences to anything. Multiverse and variations of multiverse. It means there's no consequence to anything. Oh no, Gamora died. Don't worry about it. Gamora's back. But John, it's not the same Gamora. It's the same Gamora. Get out of here with the semantics. It's Gamora. oh no, Spider-Man. Oh, don't worry. Another one. Like, multiverse literally takes away any consequences of anything. It's right up there with time travel. There's no problem that's ever been introduced in a movie that can't be fixed with time travel. Now, like time travel, there are some great movies that utilize time travel. Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, Back to the Future. There are definitely movies that use time travel brilliantly. The Tom Cruise movie, Live, Die, Repeat, Edge of Tomorrow, Spankity Doo, Spankity Da. That movie is great, and it uses an element of time travel. Multi-dimensional stuff like Spider-Man No Way Home can be great, but I also just find it to be a really lazy thing. And that's why when Kevin Feige said, like, I honestly thought, and some of you guys will remember this, before Doctor Strange, The Multiverse of Madness came out and it was coming up, I predicted, and I was so wrong. I predicted and I thought, you know what? They're going to use Multiverse of Madness as a way to close off the multiverse nonsense, right? That multiverse is going to threaten all of reality and Doctor Strange is going to fix it and close off multiverse. Boy, was I wrong, because then when I'm at CinemaCon just before Doctor Strange comes out, Kevin Feige comes out and says, with Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, we really open up the multiverse. And I'm like, oh God, oh no, oh God. And please, Kevin, don't say it. Please, Kevin, don't say it. And then Kevin says, so we are ushering in the multiverse saga. I'm like, oh shit. Oh shit. Here we go. So again, like, look, time travel, multiverse, like anything else, in the right hands, it can be done in a great way. There have been examples of it being done great. I already mentioned a couple of them. It's just in general, it doesn't normally work for me. Like, an NBA player can heave up a shot from center court. It could go in. There have been examples of when it does go in. But most of the time it won't. Most of the time it'll miss the basket entirely or miss the backboard entirely. Like, most of the time it doesn't work, but there are times that it does. That's how I feel about multiverse and time travel. Most of the time it doesn't work for me. I think it's super, it's the laziest thing you can do as a writer, but there have been times that it's been great. There has been times time travel and in some cases multiverse stuff has worked really, really well. So I don't know, but that's why I generally feel negative about it, but that's just me, Roble. All right, next up. And our final question today comes to us from Logan, who writes, in addition to Shogun, Last of Us, House of Hot G, I think you mean Hot D, House of the Dragon, and The Boys, I'd like to add Chernobyl. Oh, yeah. Chernobyl, Stranger Things, and Euphoria to my top tier shows from the past 5 years. Here's the thing about Chernobyl. Chernobyl, which is done by the guy who's doing Last of Us, Chernobyl was nothing short of absolute brilliance. Absolute brilliance. But it's not a show. It was a mini-series. There's a difference. There's never going to be a season 2 of Chernobyl, right? It was a mini-series. And one of the greatest things I've ever seen on television. And it won all the Emmys and all that kind of stuff. And it's absolutely fantastic. I'm a big fan of Stranger Things as well. It's just, there's some really good TV right now, guys. There's some really, really good TVs. All right. With that down, guys, we've already been going, we've already been going over 2 hours. I'll tell you what, though, I'm going to take a few minutes here. I'm going to take a few minutes, and I'm just going to take some questions from the live chat. So here, do me a favor. I definitely will not answer every question. I'm just going to answer a couple. But if you have a question, look into the live chat right now, guys. Format it like this. Write in capital letters, question, : That way I know you're asking me a question and it's not a part of another conversation. So let's go over right now. Let's see here. Josh writes, question: the first It is the only horror film to make over 700 million. What do you think the appeal was? I think there are several things that played into it. Number one, it was a recognizable IP because there had been, the classic miniseries had already been out. It was a very popular book, all that kind of stuff. Two, massive fear of people of clowns, right? A lot of people, big fear of clowns. So that was like applied too. But I guess another third thing was a great cast. You had a great cast. But I think the main thing was, it was an amazing ad campaign. It was a tremendous ad campaign. All the trailers were dynamite. All the trailers knocked it out of the park. It was just fantastic. It was really fantastically done and got a lot of people out, and then positive word of mouth, right? It was a great, It Chapter 2, not so good, but the first one was a really good movie. So positive word of mouth, absolutely brilliant marketing campaign, recognizable IP. I think all those things kind of worked into it. All right. Let's see here. Millie Magna writes, do you think The Boys relies too much on shock value? No, because the brilliance of The Boys, like for me, like I said a little bit earlier in the show today, like, yeah, the Ashley stuff was, oh my God. And Sister Sage getting shot in the head and like all that. Yes, lots of shock there. But the brilliance of the show is without any dialogue, Firecracker in the bathroom crying in the mirror. The best parts of the show is Sister Sage talking to Newman and telling the story of her grandmother and giving us understanding of the motivations of what's driving Sister Sage to do what she does. The most brilliant part of the show was Homelander in his own mind being humiliated and embarrassed because Newman had to step in and save the meeting and talk around as he stands there trying to look solid, but you could tell he's so annoyed at himself. He's embarrassed, all that kind of stuff. That's the thing about The Boys. It has the shock stuff, but that's not what the show relies on. It's funny. It's great. It's super entertaining. But what the show relies on is great characters and great screenwriting. And it's just like, that's what's memorable about the show. Like, yeah, A-Train in season 1 ran through the guy's girlfriend, shocked us. But the best episode was the scene on the airliner. As Homelander and Maeve, like Maeve realizes to horror that what Homelander is suggesting, that we just leave. Let's leave and just let all these people die. And she's like, well, let's save the little girl. Let's save as many as we can. Yeah, no, we can't, because then the story will get out about how we weren't able to save the plane. I mean, Homelander didn't want to kill all the people on the plane, but he's like, we can't save these people. Let's go. I mean, it's that stuff. That's what the show relies on. That's what makes the show what it is. The shock value and the fart in a cake and breast milk squirt. Yeah, that's all shocking and memorable. But at the end of the day, that's not what the show is built on. The show is built on brilliant writing, fantastic characters, depths of motivation. The shock stuff there is just a delightful icing on top, to be honest with you. Okay. Let's see here. Where are we at? Reverend, I should say. I said Revenge before. I think it's Reverend, writes, what do you think of the Deadpool marketing so far, not counting the popcorn bucket? Honestly, first of all, the trailers have been great. I've loved the trailers. Great. The commercials, the Michelob beer can commercial being made out of anime. Great. Honestly, though, a little lighter and more subdued than I was expecting. To be honest, like I think the marketing has been very good by most movie standards. Very, very good. But frankly, by Deadpool standards, a little subdued and a little normal. Now, we are still almost 3 weeks away from the movie coming out. I suspect this week is when they are really going to start throwing the marketing of Deadpool and Wolverine into overdrive. So far, I think it's been very good marketing. I think the marketing has been very, very good. But I expect it to pick up. I do expect it to pick up as we're now in the final 3 weeks leading into the new movie. All right, good question. Let's see here. What's next? This is a really good question. It's funny because we were just talking about this last night. Mr. Hank Dunn is asking, how is it dealing with people working in your house every day? Because the studio is now in my house, right? It's here. We're in my converted garage is now a studio, and we have other people come in every day. Much easier than we anticipated. And because we did this before too, but here's the real saving grace is we have a separate entrance. So when Ray or Jonathan or Paris or Chris or Rob come to the house, they don't have to come to the front door, knock on the door, ring the doorbell, have us go and answer the door, to have them walk through the house to come. That doesn't happen. We have a separate door for the garage. So in the mornings, I come in here into the garage in the mornings to start getting the show ready, and I unlock the door. And everybody who comes to the house now knows how to get down the side of my house and just come in the door. So they just come and let themselves in. And the only time they go into the house is to go use the bathroom. So really, because we were talking to our friends, Laura and Spencer last night, and we were kind of talking, Anne was talking about it. She goes, I was afraid it might be a little intrusive, but she goes, honestly, she goes, hardly ever notice. And Anne says, the really good thing is I get to see my brother every day. Because believe it or not, Ray is the friendliest guy in the world. Like, he can make friends with anybody he runs into. It's like a mutant superpower. But he's a super hermit. He's a total hermit. Like, it's very difficult for us to get Ray to leave the house. He rarely comes over. Like, we'll often have to say, hey, we're going to do a viewing party of Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon or something. Come on over, or we're going to have a barbecue. It's difficult to get him to come over. He hardly ever leaves the house. He's a total hermit. So even though we only live about 10 minutes from Ray, Anne would sometimes go weeks without seeing her brother, even though he's like 10 minutes up the road. Well, like weeks without seeing her brother. And like now she gets to see him basically at least for a little bit every single day. So that's good. And it gets Ray out of the house, which is always good. I'm always trying to get Ray out of the house. So yeah, there's that. All right. Shadow Knight writes, why do you honestly think Disney has not pushed to replace Kathleen Kennedy from running Star Wars? The main thing I believe is that there is one language that a lot of executives understand, and that is money. And despite what a lot of people, oh, no, CJ, no. CJ's writing needs Lucas to write one again. No, fuck that. I'm a huge George Lucas worshiper, but after the prequels, don't let George Lucas write another fucking movie. Don't let George Lucas write another Star Wars movie. Like, again, he wrote the greatest movies of all time with the original trilogy, but somewhere between the original trilogy and the prequels, he completely had a disconnect between him and certain parts of reality, and I never want him writing another one. Anyway, that being said, what a lot of people overlook and forget is that every movie that Kathleen Kennedy in the Star Wars universe has produced, other than Solo, which never should have been made. I like Solo. I think Solo is a very good space adventure movie. I like it. It's good. But I've always said it never should have been made. I said that when they announced it, that they should never make that movie. That aside from Solo, every single movie that they put out has made over $1 billion. Now, there are some very weak-minded people out there that then try to make it just, but that's because of Star Wars. Anybody can make a Star Wars and to make $1 billion. Really? You really think that? Because if that kind of principle was true, then Batman versus Superman, that movie, number one, should have made $1 billion in its sleep. In its sleep. You make a movie called Batman versus Superman. You should be able to fart and make $1 billion. That movie should have potentially been a $2 billion film. Not automatic, but it had the potential to be a $2 billion film. Automatic, in your sleep, $1 billion film. Easily. No questions asked. That should have been an automatic $1 billion film. But guess what? It wasn't. Not even close. People do that in sports too. A super team gets put together and it's like, oh, just give them the championship now. It's automatic. Anybody could coach that team and have them win the championship. Doesn't happen. So this weak-minded, lame excuse of trying to skirt the actual issue that, guess what? Other than Solo, every single Star Wars movie that Kathleen Kennedy has put out has made over $1 billion. One of them is even the highest grossing film in history in the United States. No movie domestically has ever made more money than The Force Awakens. None. Not Titanic, not Avatar, not Endgame, nothing. No movie has ever made as much money domestically as that. So they make money. They make money. Now somebody, so yeah, like, hey, she's running the company and it's making us a lot of money. Now, at some point though, somebody's going to have to recognize that the damage being done to the brand, the damage being done to the brand is ultimately going to start costing them money. Because guess what? Transformers movies were making a lot of money too, until everybody caught on that these movies are crap. And all of a sudden, whoo, they took a mass, and I think it might take them putting out a new Star Wars movie and having it make $500 million instead of $1 billion, or $400 million instead of $1 billion. That maybe then makes people go, oh, okay, well now it's hurting us in the pocketbook. Now it's hurting us in our bank accounts. Now you have our attention. But I mean, as long as her being in charge of Star Wars keeps bringing in billion-dollar films, when they get around to actually putting out films, because that's another issue altogether. We've gone 5 years without a Star Wars movie in theaters. What the hell? That should be a big red flag too. So, yeah, it's just is what, one of our viewers, Hackno, is saying in the live chat, well, nobody buys the merch anymore except for Baby Yoda. But here's the reality. Nobody buys merch to any movies anymore. It used to be when I was a kid and I was growing up that if a big movie came out, it would sell billions of dollars in toys and all that kind of stuff. It's not like that anymore. Grown-ups now will buy Hot Toys and will buy, stuff like that. And certainly Pops sell, but it's not really like that anymore for most of them, except for Baby Yoda. Baby Yoda sold, they made billions of dollars off Baby Yoda stuff. Billions of dollars off that stuff, which is crazy. All right, I'll take one more. Let me see. Then I'm going to wrap this thing up because, like I said, we've been going for 2.5 hours already. Where's there another one? I don't see another one. Okay, let's try this. Well, this is true. 00711 says, you see that middle-aged men outpace kids in toy sales. Totally believe it. Totally believe it. But as men, we don't call them toys. We call them collectibles. Just to be clear about that. Let's see. Last one we'll do today. Come to us from Cord Cutter Cam, who writes, with now seeing both Bad Boys Ride or Die and Axel F, would you want to see a crossover? Nah, I'll be honest with you. No, I'm not really big on crossover movies, to be honest with you. Now, there have been times that has worked, but most of the times you end up with an Alien Predator type of thing. So now don't get me wrong. If they did a Bad Boys meets Axel Foley movie, I would go see it. Sure. But do I really want one? To be honest, no. I'd look forward to seeing another Bad Boys movie. I'd look forward to seeing another Axel Foley movie, but I wouldn't be really all that interested, to be honest with you. In a crossover. That's just me. All right, guys. And that will do it for today's installment of Open Mic. Thank you so much for being here, guys, and making this little show part of your day. Big special thank you to all you guys who sent in the questions. Number one, because you gave us fun things to talk about, but number two, you supported our channel as you did it, and all us involved with the show. Thank you guys so very much for your support. Hey guys, don't forget to come on back. We got some big stories we're already working on for tomorrow's episode of the John Campea Show. Chris Carr is going to be in. You guys haven't seen Chris in a while because Chris is on Fridays, but we've gone a couple of Fridays in a row without doing a show, so we haven't seen Chris in a while. So I asked her if she would come in and do the show tomorrow since we've gone so many Fridays without a show. So Chris will be on tomorrow. We're looking forward to having her in. Paris will be back later in the week next week, and we hope you guys will join us. So looking forward to House of the Dragon, 2.5 hours away from when it launches and comes out. So excited for it. I know many of you guys are too. I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit on the show tomorrow. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for being here. I appreciate you all so much. Come on back tomorrow. My name's John Campea, and until next time, my friends, Milk Splash.